Good morning, and welcome to this Project Safety Journal webinar. The session is entitled Understanding ISO 19656, Health and Safety Information Management, and it's in association with IdeaGen Mail Manager. I'm Denise Shevin. I'm the editor of Project Safety Journal, and I'm chairing today's webinar. Well, the forthcoming launch of the new standard, ISO 19656, will complete the transition of the PAS 1192 series to international standards, and also introduces much needed guidance relating to the information management of health and safety information. On today's webinar, we have the author of the new standard, Nick Nisbet, who will give the inside track on the development of the standard and the feedback he's received so far from industry. Then we'll have Hugh Knight of IdeaGen Mail Manager, who will focus on an often neglected part of information management, which is email management. There's going to be a Q&A session after our presentation. But first, just let me introduce the speakers. We have, as I said, Nick Nisbet, who's the author of the standard, and then Hugh Knight, who's the senior client manager of IdeaGen Mail Manager. Just before we start the webinar, there's a few points of housekeeping I need to mention. So firstly, if you want to ask a question to our speakers, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. So that's the Q&A function, not the chat function. You can pose questions as yourself or anonymously, but not as someone else. Panelists will address your questions in the at the end, at the Q&A session at the end. Secondly, this webinar is being recorded and will be able to watch on demand via the original registration link, and that will be available later today. And lastly, there's a 1 hour CPD credit for those who complete this webinar live. And you'll get CPD certificates later today. Well, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand now to Nick to start his presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got a few slides which I'd like to talk through, so I'll just share my screen. Yes, so I've slightly changed the title to Anticipating rather than Understanding, because the standard isn't due to be published until early next year. And I think that therefore we have to be quite careful and be aware that things can change over the coming months. However, it will be published under the extended title you can see on the screen. And I always have to apologize for the fact that it's a very long title. The first part is the name of the committee that produces it. It is the ISO Committee on Organization and Digitization of Information. The subcommittee is Information Management Using Information Modeling, which is the 19650 series. And the working group is the working group on Part 6, Health and Safety Information. I'm Nicholas Nisbet. I'm a member of various ISO committees, Building Smart committees, one CEN committee, and a couple of BSI committees. And I'm the author or lead for the production of Part 6. The Let me just get the, yes. I've got to bracket my remarks with a caution that any draft is provisional and shouldn't be relied upon. As we'll see, there have been 2 drafts so far, and we're on our way to making our 3rd and final one. The final outcome will be a consensus of all the working group. So the title of author is a bit of a misnomer. It's my job to bring the feelings of the working group together in a text that everyone can agree. And my comments today are not about the final outcome, but where we've got to and some of the ideas behind the development of the standard. Just to say a little bit more about the ISO standards process, you can see that there are lots of hoops to go through in this process. And we've completed and ticked a fair number of them, but we're still a way off the step 60.60 international standard published. We've got about 11 months to complete that. In summary, on the right, you can see that any ISO standard starts with a new work item proposal, with the formation of a working group, which develops a committee draft, which is shared with the national standards bodies around the world, the committee that their committees that shadow the ISO work. And then there's further drafting, and you get to a draft international standard, which is where we're at. We've just received the comments back on that draft international standard, and so we then have to respond to those comments to produce the final draft international standard, which, with, we hope, minor corrections, will be accepted for publication. The rigor of this process means that by the time it is finished and published, it will have been reviewed by the standards community and industry in probably 20 or 25 countries around the world who are active in the ISO standards process. We have a timeline which we have to stick to. What this tells you is that we started in the middle of 2021. We've had to ask for an extension because there was a change of author. But we've just, as I said, we've completed in green our CD ballot and our DIS ballot. Pleased to say that that ballot came back with only 1 vote against, and I've subsequently been informed by that national committee that it was a mistake. However, here we are sitting in March 2024, and you'll see that the final icon is sitting in February 2025, which means that we have to respond to the 200 odd comments, which there's a process and a timetable for getting through those. What's the standard about? Well, it's joining together the ideas about collaborative BIM that we've seen in ISO 19650 with the particular issue of health and safety information. And what it's about is that there's an opportunity using the 19650 process to identify issues, to share and accumulate information, and to converge on solutions. And this is exactly the same model as we see in part 2 for projects and part 3 for asset management, that by increasing the availability of information, we hope that the industry can produce better results. There is a caveat on this, which is that the scope of this standard is not how to define it's not to define how health and safety information is developed and produced. And that's an important clarification because many countries, including our own, have a legal framework for risk management, which we're not affecting or changing. We're just saying that the outcomes can be shared for great benefit. It also has the idea, common to 19650, that pre-project there may be asset information. During a project, there will be a project CDE, and once the facility goes into use, there will continue to be an asset information CDE. And so the information about health and safety is expected to fit into the management of a CDE. The other part, or just picking up on the idea of sharing and accumulating information, issues can be identified pre-construction, during construction, and during in use, and they can be managed in that same three stages. Very aware that, for example, in CDM regulations, they have separate names. They have for these risk registers at each of these stages. So pre-construction, there is a pre-construction file, there is a construction file, and construction plan, I should say, risk plan. And in use, we have the health and safety file. We are trying to make sure that although it may be called different things and it may be controlled by different people at different stages, it remains the same body of information. And of course, lastly, what we're trying to do is to reduce occurrences of issues during construction and in use. And again, we have to be mindful that different legislation may affect those phases. So a major part of the challenge in writing Part 6 is to respect the legal framework which it may have to fit into. Those of you who are familiar with PAS 1192 Part 6 will have seen this diagram before. I think it's iconic and very useful to highlight that an issue is usually about some kind of risk. We could also talk about opportunities, but that's probably another talk. And that risk centers around a hazard. And leading up to that hazard, there are things that affect the likelihood. And in particular, there are associations with kinds of materials and products, associations with different kinds of activity, and of course, associations with different kinds of location. Coming out of those factors that affect the likelihood, we have the idea that yes, there are consequences. Health and safety is concerned with fatalities, with injuries, with ill health. But most importantly is the sort of white dashes, which are the introduction of mitigations, which either side of the hazard create barriers to reduce the likelihood or to control the consequences. Unlike Part 6, the PAS, as well as issues, we're going to be saying a bit more about the context, which was an important idea in the PAS, that a risk must be seen in the context of its project or its maintenance program or whatever, in the context of its site, and of course in the context of the type of facility that we're talking about. And there may be specific aspects of those three things, such as unusual work packages, unusual zones, near a canal, unstable ground or whatever. And there may be unusual systems features of the facility that are not as usual. We're also going to be saying a bit more about representing the treatment and including incidents in the log to act as a long stop on making sure that the right information is being collected. One of the key ideas in PAS 1192, part 6, is the idea that the information about risk should become a library. And this diagram is trying to sort of summarize that whilst every project, every facility has a history with its context and any events that may have happened, and for any project or program, we may have risks that we're concerned about and their treatments. We should be able to draw on a library of risk types, risk knowledge, and also treatment types and context type. And this was this generalized learning and resource generation. There was an idea that we introduced in the PAS, and it's been quite pleasing to see that people have started to implement that with publicly available risk databases. At the moment in the UK, we have the CROSS Committee on Safety, which is generating material. So is the Safety Base and the Discovering Health and Safety programs. So that's an idea that has proved very timely in the standard. Another part of the ISO, which wasn't present before, is to offer a formal database schema for asset information. And this is not it. This was an early sketch. But to help application developers, particularly those around CDEs and project services, to have an implementation of the risk register, offering a comprehensive representation that can be shared by all the stakeholders in the project and remain timely and maintain the history of where it came from. So yeah, I'm not going to run through this in detail, but this is jam and honey for application development. And what we want to make sure, of course, is that risk information is well structured and is reusable. I ought to give you just some indication of what the discussion points are at this stage. And I'm pleased to say that of the 200 issues that got mentioned, the majority were spelling mistakes or punctuation mistakes or formatting mistakes, which have to be weeded out before we can go to full publication. But I think the kinds of things that I think we'll be talking about over the next few months are things like the scope. In the title, we have health and safety. And the question has been raised, does that include welfare? And does it include environment? Now, you can imagine that I don't think welfare will be too controversial, but actually what we mean by the environment risks, we need to narrow that down, I expect, because there are environmental risks that might help impact the health and well-being of people, and then there are environmental risks that will affect, well, are affecting our futures. so we'll have to pin that down somewhat. I think, the intention is that we're trying to share risk information where there is either a legal or a moral obligation to share the information and work together to mitigate it. Of course, there are other risks which organizations have to be concerned about, under which they're not obliged to share. Commercial risks, quality risks, time risks, or whatever. And those are not in scope of what we're trying to do. Those of you who follow Uniclass will have seen that there is now a risk table, and there are quite specifically two subsections of that table, which are about the kinds of risks that are under a duty to be shared, whereas others, such as security and commercial risks, are not under any obligation to be shared, and therefore would be out of the scope of such a system. Other things we need to clarify is the use of databases or simplified risk registers. I'm talking about spreadsheets, of course. And also how it's represented in BIM, how risks are represented, in order to make the information more accessible. The point of putting risk information in BIM is not to hide it. I've mentioned the green one, which is legal obligations in UK, Europe, and the rest of the world. And this is it's really a matter of being absolutely clear that what we're trying to do is help the communication. We're not telling people how to assess risk, but how to communicate the results of any such assessment. If you want to consider I think ISO 41,000, perhaps 31,000, on risk management has a range of about 20 different risk assessment methods. But what we're trying to do is to provide the industry with the means to share and make it accessible, and to help prioritize attention. Other issues which follow from that is, are we right to try and communicate issues by asking people to specify something about the likelihood, consequence, and some combination of those, a risk priority? There's one view that says that by breaking it down into those three factors or those three outcomes, three indicators, let's call them indicators, it helps discussions. Other people are saying that not all risk assessments break things down into that simple model. And then, as with any new standard, we have to think about the relationship to other standards, particularly Building Smart. Many of you will be aware that the latest version of IFC was published at the beginning of this year, IFC 4.3. And there's also a Building Smart standard called the collaboration format, which is another mechanism, or it's for sharing issues. And so I think we need to make sure that people understand how risks can be communicating using those two standards. Of course, we need to make sure that everything that we say is compatible with what's already in parts 1 to 5. Parts 1, 2, and 3 are coming up for their 5th birthday, which for a standard is a major milestone because they automatically get reviewed. So we're going to have to work particularly hard to make sure that we are not changing or not out of step with those parts when we come up towards publication. And I think one last issue, which I think has proved particularly problematic for um, the health and safety implementations within 1192, is distinguished between real requirements and information requirements. Now, the moment I say that, I'm making a fool of myself because, of course, information requirements are real. But for health and safety, it's very important to distinguish between, for example, client requirements and then the things that support those, which tend to be information requirements. So we'll have to be very clear about that to help the industry make sure that the right phrases and the right ideas appear in contractual documents and in project implementation standards. So that's all I really wanted to highlight. The discussion points, if they trigger any thoughts, use the Q&A, and we will talk about some of them at the end. But thank you. I hope that was at least a little bit interesting.
Well, thank you very much, Nick, for that very insightful and well explained trot through the new draft of the health and safety standard. But I could ask you to stop sharing your screen and turn your camera and mic off, please, so that we can go over to Hugh Knipe, who's going to talk to us about email management. So over to you, Hugh. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Nick. I know I always find these sessions really useful. I always learn a lot from kind of coming on and running these webinars. So as mentioned earlier, my name's Hugh Knipe and I work with businesses globally, mainly in the architecture, engineering and construction sector to help them unify their project information. So to begin with, the technology landscape globally is changing at an ever increasing speed. This is no different within the architecture, engineering and construction industries or the AEC industries. I'm sure you've noticed that in your own work, technology is continuing to rapidly evolve and drive the AEC to become safer, cheaper and quicker. Today, there are numerous examples of how new technology is revolutionizing the sector, including artificial intelligence, VR and BIM. It's no surprise that with everything going on in the world right now, and teams either working remotely or in a hybrid working environment, that it's becoming more and more difficult to access project information. AEC professionals like yourselves rely on strong, consistent communication that might take the form of pitches, winning clients, and day-to-day communication with your colleagues. The days are gone, or at least limited, where you can turn around to the desk next to you and ask your colleague to help you find an email, for example. What this means for a lot of people is that they don't have access to the information they need, and they are left out of the communication loop. As you can imagine, this is a huge problem. With over 347 billion emails expected to be sent and received every day in 2023, email is the most used communication and collaboration tool across the world, but it's the one thing most people manage differently, creating huge risks for the future. One of these risks comes in the form of project rework. A recent study found that 80% of project professionals spend half of their time on rework, and poor communication costs around $62 million every year on average. Rework doesn't just waste your time and money, but can cause huge communication breakdowns within your team and with your senior executives and stakeholders. So here at Mail Manager, we run an annual survey called the State of AEC Project Management Research Report, which aims to discover the project management and collaboration challenges faced by companies globally. Our 2023 report surveyed 550 AEC leaders and explores, firstly, how firms manage project information, secondly, where they store it, and thirdly, how they go about retrieving data when legal disputes arise. It also provides insight into how the industry has been affected by the current global economy, such as the cost of living crisis, supply chain issues, and as we talked about previously, the latest big building regulations. So let's jump into the main findings of our 2023 report. Firstly, the majority of firms have stated that they cannot easily access their project information. We found that actually 90% of respondents were concerned about the accessibility and visibility of their project information. And over a quarter of organizations have said that they're at risk when staff leave the business. Our research has found that more firms are aware of the importance of filing emails as part of their offboarding processes in comparison to last year, but 28% still do not require emails to be filed, and therefore it becomes very difficult to retrieve. Unsurprisingly, this is leading to disputes continuing to rise year on year. In our 2021 report, 63% of respondents experienced some form of dispute. Last year, that number rose to 91%, so a significant increase. And with regards to the reasons for disputes, project scope changes and payment issues are the key causes, largely because project details are often buried in emails and documents. And finally, email is the most used communication and collaboration tool in the industry. So, in the current economic climate, we're seeing trends in the AEC where costs are on the rise, margins are tighter than ever, and there are large staff cutbacks. Even with the larger global firms, they are reporting huge drop-offs in profit as their staff costs are increasing, and unfortunately, more companies are going into administration than ever. So, with so much uncertainty and so many people leaving businesses, there is a huge need for organizations to start thinking about their information management. If we look at some of the stats on screen, considering 28% of businesses do not have email filing as part of their offboarding processes, and 81% of firms use email for the majority of project correspondence, thousands of firms are still at great risk of losing information. And for 88% of people we surveyed, their overall volume of email has increased in the last year. And the contents of these emails are becoming more important than ever, with 11% of people claiming it is now business critical. And on top of this, almost 2/3 of AEC businesses regularly need to retrieve emails from past projects. For many firms, emails and keeping them well organized and accessible is not often a consideration until things go wrong. And at the end of the day, they hold vital information that could mean the difference between winning and losing a dispute. So it needs to be taken more seriously. Our research has also uncovered that only 9% of people surveyed have not experienced a dispute in the last 12 months. The top two causes were issues related to project scope changes and chasing payments. Unfortunately for the industry, issues relating to project scope are continuing to gain momentum. Why? Because the majority, about 85%, of information relating to scope changes are stored in email and formal documents. To break this down further, 12% of project scope changes do not reside in the digital space at all. And shockingly, 11% of respondents highlighted that the only place they are kept is in the project manager's head. With findings like these, it's hardly surprising that 90% of businesses are concerned about their project information not being readily available or accessible. This missing information doesn't only relate to external stakeholders in the cases of disputes. Think about where your health and safety documentation resides in your business. For a lot of the companies we speak to, confirmations that individuals have taken part in health and safety training is often communicated via email. And often occupational health and safety policies and documentation are shared this way as well. If you're not maintaining these records, your company is left at risk here too. We are consistently seeing that failing to make emails visible and accessible to project teams can cause issues that result in a legal dispute. According to Arcadis's 2022 Global Construction Disputes Report, the global average value of disputes was $52.6 million, with an average length of 15.4 months. Firms cannot afford to let information like email correspondence slip through the cracks. We've seen this leaky bucket of email negatively affecting AEC firms globally recently. Firms must be aware of their corporate history and be able to prove everything that has happened on projects, especially as stakes are so high. Given the nature of the industry you operate in, firms need to guarantee information visibility and accessibility to ensure they are making the right decisions. In the best cases, poor information management costs firms money, but in the worst, it makes people unsafe. Given the size of the global disputes environment, the cost of mismanaging email is immense and includes information being locked away in individuals' inboxes, staff wasting time looking for the information they need to do their job, and staff leaving the business or going on holiday, but a range of important information is trapped in their inbox. With proper email management processes in place, businesses can ensure that all project information and correspondence is captured and accessible by entire project teams. This will reduce the risks of rework and stop project disputes in their track. Plus, you'll have this information to hand years down the line should a liability dispute arise. That has just been a quick overview of our 2023 State of the AEC report. We'll send out the full report in the next few days if you're interested to read it in more detail. So what does this mean for information management and how can it help you avoid disputes going forward? Luckily for us, technology advancements are continuing to improve how we work. As I touched on earlier, AEC firms are increasingly using tech to boost efficiencies. And BIM advancements means that team members can all be on the same page. The use of BIM has seen several benefits, including reducing waste, improving collaboration, enhancing productivity, it saves users time, and it increases a company's overall use of technology. It's improving safety across the industry and provides deep insights into existing buildings as well. So while all this new tech and standards like ISO 650 and the latest -6 are making our lives easier and really boosting the industry, we have access to a massive amount of data, both inside and outside of our organizations, that makes information management difficult. This sensitive and often confidential information is typically stored in documents and correspondence, and it can often be quite inaccessible, stored in disparate applications by various departments or even different offices. Information is the lifeblood of a project, but only if it's well organized, accessible, secure, and updated. And this is no easy task. But what's the solution? You need a single place where all your project and client information is stored so you can see the complete picture of any given project you're working on. You need a single source of truth, which people also are referring as a golden thread of information. It's a concept based around bringing all information together, ensuring everyone in an organization has access to everything they need before making any business decisions. It provides better working methods and encourages more transparent communication. This is helping organizations drive faster change without compromising quality. And it ensures that all project and client teams have access to the correct information they need when they need it. Managing project information in one place is critical to avoiding disputes, and when done right, allows teams to use their time, resources, and knowledge to make the right decisions at the right time. The two easiest ways to create a single source of truth are by removing manual processes of information sharing and increasing information visibility across the board. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that if your single source of truth is not fully complete, it's not the truth. What we've seen in our research report is that while firms are stringent about how their documents and contracts are managed, email is the one thing everyone manages slightly differently. Without the right tools and automation in place, project teams are left to their own devices. Some people will move emails into Outlook folders, some save important information to their individual desktops, and others simply delete information if they don't see a need for it any longer. In all of these scenarios, that information is trapped in silos and inaccessible to the wider project team. Losing access to essential emails or not including them in your overall information management strategy can prove detrimental to firms. When emails are managed correctly, everyone in an organization has access to the information they need to make the right decisions at the right time. It provides a much better way of working, encourages more transparent communications, and ensures that all team members have access to that single source of truth. Plus, it removes the responsibility of storing and managing data for one person or a single department. It's time to avoid these common email headaches, having to question that this isn't what we agreed, asking a client, when did you tell us this? Having to admit that John has left the company, so you're coming to it a bit cold. Not being confident and having to say you never sent us this, or chasing colleagues to either forward me that email or asking them to send you something before your next meeting. And some of the benefits of centralized information include your data becoming more discoverable. It helps you eliminate human error through automating your workflows. You're able to more easily establish version control. You reduce the amount of billable time that people are spending on searching or recreating lost documents. You increase transparency and traceability across the firm, and you're able to more easily comply with regulatory and legal requirements. And that's where Mail Manager comes in. So who are we and why are we talking to you all today? I'm sure everyone on this call have heard or have even worked with Arup at some point. For those who haven't, Arup are a global consultancy firm who have worked on design and engineering projects, including the Sydney Opera House, the Shard, and more recently, the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. Arup built Mail Manager around 10 years ago. The reason being was that they had no control over how their staff managed their emails. Yes, there were processes in place. They tried public folders, project email addresses, manually dragging and dropping to the server, but all of these processes relied on the individual to remember to do it. And they had to decide on what is and what isn't important, which, as you can imagine, didn't always happen. This meant that they had two key issues. Firstly, that project teams didn't have up-to-date information on their projects, especially if they were new on a project or if someone else had left. The other was risk, as they had to retain data for up to 14 years after a project had finished in case of any claims or a case of litigation. With their existing ways of working, there was a chance they would be able to find the data, but it would be extremely time-consuming to do so. So Arup wanted to find a system that would allow project teams to be able to find any email across the project within a few clicks. But the reliance on users to file information and removing the billable time wasted doing that administration task had to go. They needed something that they could turn on overnight that would start learning their behaviors and mean they wouldn't have to discuss email management again. They couldn't find anything that let them do that, so they decided to create their own system. And now we're in some of the biggest AEC firms internationally, and we regularly speak to our customers about how email processes have benefited their business, and we tend to hear a few things pop up regularly. For Gensler, the key benefits were that we helped save their staff 5 hours per week per person in administrative printing, file coding, and hard copy filing. And we've helped them even comply with many quality assurance and statutory standards. Ramble, they noted that Mail Manager means that important project information is now accessible by the wider team, even when people are on holiday or have left the business. They are confident in the fact that they will have access to all their information years down the line, and is now less time intensive to file emails, so staff can focus on value-adding work that they enjoy. With Mail Manager, Ramble have saved approximately 3 hours per user per week, especially for their project members and managers. For WSP, better email management processes means that they have been able to retrieve project information in seconds. They find greater business efficiency as they can spend more time on real work and greater visibility by capturing both sides of the conversation. All of these customer stories you've heard today tie back to the 4 key issues we hear from businesses we talk to that are ultimately the reason they want to purchase an email management solution like Mail Manager. They are concerned about the consequences they may face if they were to lose any project information. They or their team spend countless hours every week searching for information contained in emails, or they're wasting time on admin, like manually filing those project emails away. They're concerned that they lack control over the communication that is coming into and leaving the business. And finally, information is trapped in the individual's inboxes, making it effectively unusable. With Mail Manager, we give our customers confidence that any email that has been filed can be easily retrieved. And that retrieval process will only take a couple of seconds. This will lead to increasing your productivity, and you'll have one central space for all your project information, helping you create and maintain that single source of truth. So what I'll do now, I'll come out of the presentation and I'll give you a quick demonstration as to what that search functionality looks like. So this is where you'd come and look for not just your own, but your colleagues' emails as well. And as you can see, I'll be searching through over 370,000 emails. I can put a keyword at the top here. So if I just put in health, that's going to go through those 370,000 emails and pick out any emails with the word health, either in the subject line or the body of the text. If I want to narrow down to a single project, I can highlight whichever project I want with this option list here. So this has brought up 5,000 emails with the word health in. What I can do, I can just say, I just want to see the emails with attachments, and that's taken it down to 510. And let's bring this down further. Let's only just see the emails from the past 3 months. So you're now able to see just the 11 emails that contain the word health and an attachment in the last 3 months. You've got the preview pane on the right-hand side, so you can really and quickly see the information that you need to see. And it's emails that not just you've been involved in, but all your colleagues have been involved in as well. That's just one example of our search functionality. What I would say is, if any other kind of questions or anything else interests you regarding Mail Manager, please do reach out and we can run you through a presentation in a little bit more detail. But that's everything from myself. I'll hand back to Denise.
Thank you very much, Hugh, for reminding us and talking us through the benefits of proper email management, and what a fantastic search facility you've got there. Thank you. So, Nick, could I ask you to rejoin us on screen so we can push on with the Q&A now? We have about 15 minutes for questions. So without further ado, I'll sort of ask some of those really. Thank you very much for those who have shared questions. We've got a really good mixture of things to ask. So one for you, Nick. It says, well, this is Andrew Watson is asking this question, and he's asking, while sharing is made clear, underpinning communication, the original Health and Safety at Work Act relies on developing cooperation. How much of that spirit can be embraced in the use of ISO? Is that something you could perhaps answer? Is it?
Well, absolutely. I think the one of the interesting things I learned when I first got involved with PAS 1192 Part 6 is that, strictly speaking, cooperation has a different meaning to collaboration. That actually, strictly, cooperation means not obstructing other people. Collaboration is actively behaving in a way that actually supports everyone getting the job done. So I think the obligation to cooperate is kind of trumped by the opportunity that 19650 gives for people to collaborate. And I think the tools we're advocating in 19650, especially the CDE, sharing is part of the idea, and the time that information spends in the shared state are all intended to help that collaboration. And the CDE rules, the rules around using a CDE, really turn it into a machine that generates trust. Now, of course, that's, there's still the need for people to engage, but given a CDE platform and the rules around 19650, I think there's every opportunity for people to do the right thing. Can't say more than that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer there, Nick. Just a very just sticking with you for if we can.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, Paul Brown, how can clients be influenced to provide greater support for the use of BIM for health and safety management information? I'm sure you haven't got a magic wand on this, but
no, I don't. Sitting on one side of the industry, we can wish for better clients, and sitting on the other side, we can wish for a better supply chain. What we have to do is to give every opportunity. And picking up on one of the ideas from Hugh's talk, the benefit to the client of making health and safety issues integrated with all the other activities around the project makes it a lot more real. If the register is isolated and the responsibility of a small number of health and safety managers, then it can feel like a sideshow. What we're trying to do is to bring the risk information into all the main processes that 19650 advocates. Picking up on what Hugh said about the single source of truth, trying to make sure there's a single source of narrative truth. The origins of the CDE were to make sure that the narrative was preserved of who knew what, who did what, who viewed what when. And of course, we're also trying to achieve a single source of descriptive truth, a single state for a description of the project and any outstanding risks and opportunities. So, the sell to clients is that information management and BIM make for a more collaborative, more integrated approach to the way projects and asset management is delivered. Beyond that, I think we're, yes, we if the industry works better, then clients will join in.
okay, that makes sense. Just a very quick one, Nick, just a bit of information someone is asking for. Margaret Saki is just asking whether is there a draft we can refer to as part of the health and safety exec working group led by Gordon Crick at the health and safety exec?
There was a draft that was out for the DIS review. That process has closed, but I'm sure if you ask the right questions, you'll find access to that draft somewhere.
Okay, well, I'm sure
Like
speak to Nick
the meeting
afterwards, Margaret.
Yeah, like the meeting tomorrow.
Okay,
Oh.
just pushing on to answer a few questions on Mail Manager. So this is to you, Hugh. Couple of things. Does Mail Manager read documents attached to an email? And can I feed my historic emails into Mail Manager, or does it only work for new emails? So a couple of very practical questions there.
Yep, great questions. So Mail Manager does recognize when an email has documents attached, and you can use Mail Manager to file those documents separately. The documents will always stay part of the email when we file them to your end destination, and they are searchable within our search function. So you can see, as I showed in the demonstration, you can filter to see emails that have documents, and then you can search for the type of the documents or the name of documents as well. In terms of the second question around historic emails, yes, there's ways to bulk transfer emails into Mail Manager so that you can use our search tool to go through your historic emails. It doesn't just have to be kind of a line in the sand and everything new is captured. We can go historically as well.
Okay, but does it actually read the attachment if it, if it's searching? Would it search the attachment, or is it mostly just the, the title and whether
Yeah.
there is an attachment.
So it'd be whether there is an attachment and the title, and you can search for the
Okay.
type of attachment as well.
Okay. And just another quickie. Someone's asking what happens with sensitive emails. Can you control who can see what?
Yep. So with Mail Manager, there are no security settings within our tool. We would mirror the security settings within your own company IT infrastructure, because Mail Manager doesn't host any of your information. It all sits within your environment. So if you have permission to a folder within your system, you can file and search that folder. But for example, if your HR team, if your accounts team have a lockdown area of your IT world, only the people that have permission to those folders can file and search for that information.
Okay. And duplicate emails, what happens to those? Does it sort of
Yeah,
just
we automatically
kind of
deduplicate those emails.
okay, great. Back to you, Nick. Someone's asking, given that mental health is now appearing on tenders, they're intrigued by the idea of welfare being incorporated into 19656. Any thoughts on how that might work, really?
Oh, I think certainly certainly in the UK, mental health is on the agenda for the health and safety executive and hopefully for the industry more widely. I think just to, and a major part of the stress that people feel in the industry is because of poor management and poor information sharing. So it was obviously a win. If we can do things properly, then the stress levels of both management and workers should be improved. I think, when we're talking about sharing risk information, the question is, could an architect identify an issue which might lead to stress on construction workers later? Or, could the construction team identify an issue which might lead to mental stress on the operators of the facility? So I think we need to keep it proportionate and say that the point of sharing risk information is to get a collaborative approach and an open approach to solving things. If those two scenarios, for example, if they don't make sense, then there's no need to put those risks in. But if there is if someone can foresee or is foreseeing a particular combination of events that might cause excessive stress and anxiety and so on, then that should be raised, definitely. And we might include the late delivery of information in that category.
Okay, thank you. Just very briefly, Nick, and then we'll come back to you, Andrew, is that someone makes the point that it's Andrew Watson that audit trails should feature both in the source of truth and causal relationship in the golden thread. How do we avoid corruption with human data input and hand over, change from construction stage through the lifetime of building owners? Yeah, how do we avoid poor data?
I think you and I would actually agree on this one, that what we're trying to do is to create somewhere where you can find a single narrative. And in the case of a project, the shared information should be accessible. Hugh, I think, is saying that within an organization, people should correctly manage their email trail. I think the implication, of course, is that where things have an impact on the project as a whole, there should be some means of getting that information into the common data environment.
Hugh, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Nick, really, and I think it links in with another question that's kind of further on down.
Yes, that's what I thought
Yeah,
about whether the project and asset management, can mail manager be used within CDE? So,
yep. So as I mentioned, Mail Manager, we don't host your information, so you can kind of point our system to file into your document management system, and that includes kind of CDEs. One thing that I would kind of qualify is that not all your emails would want to kind of go into that CDE. You wouldn't want to share all your emails with a client. I'm sure there's lots of emails that go on internally that you wouldn't want external people to see. So you can file into a CDE, but then you can also have your own internal single source of truth within a separate document management system. So in terms of David's questions, yes, we do, but it's probably worth a discussion as to the different places where you're looking to file your information to.
okay. Just the final question to you, Nick, because we are running out of time. Um, Someone's saying, could a decent BIM model take the place of a health and safety file?
Well, I think when we talk about the project information model or the asset information model, we're talking about the totality. It could be the BIM model, it could be other resources. We want those things to join up so that those who are who need to or want to can access it in a 3D environment. Other roles will want to see it as a list or a schedule, and so on. So taking the place of, I think the vision is an increasingly integrated information set where there are fewer and fewer documents and more databases, including the BIM database, the risk register, and things like specifications and work orders are held in a database, not as documents. So that's the level 3 aspiration, whereupon where documents only serve as evidence, but they're not the primary source of information, and then it becomes indistinguishable. The health and safety file is the BIM, is the information that's held, and the only time you go to documents is as a secondary activity to say, oh, I need to see where that came from, or is there a photograph that confirms that, or a signed document or whatever. So documents have and photographs, for example, will always have the role as evidence. The rest of it should be an information model.
Okay, thank you. I just think we've got 1 second to for a question for you, Hugh, if that's okay. It says someone's asking what happens if someone files an email in the wrong place? Does the software carry the error over, or can that be corrected?
Yeah, great question. So if you recognize straight away, there's a way of seeing all your filing history, so you can change it there and then. Or if you notice the error when you're in our search tool, there's an option to move the email there.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for answering those questions. I'm really sorry we have run out of time, and sorry if we didn't get to your questions. Thank you very much for posting them. This webinar has been recorded, so you can watch it again or share the video with peers and colleagues via the original registration link, which you'll get later today. For more on Nick's work, you can find out more on his website, which is aec3.com, or nn@aec3.com. And for more on IdeaGen Mail Manager, find that on mailmanager.com. Nicely, mailmanager.com. Well, it simply remains for me to say a big thank you to IdeaGen Mail Manager for supporting this webinar, and to thank you both, Nick and Hugh, for your time and great insight this morning and for answering the questions so candidly, so succinctly. And thank you, our audience, for tuning in. Please enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Thank you.